Welcome to the Anime Archive Project, an effort to chronologically document anime across the 1980s. We begin our study in 1979 as disco fades amidst the rise of synthpop, the comic book stylings of Go Nagai give way to the glossy poster art of Shinji Aramaki, and Japan starts to see its economic miracle bear fruit. Xerography has been changing things, allowing for animation to be produced more quickly through a method of copying pencil drawings directly to cells for cleanup via machine. It's derived, as you may have guessed, from the Xerox photocopying method, hence its name. Eliminating the need for manual inking, it's led to a rapid increase in the number of shows and movies being produced. Although invented in 1967 and used throughout the 70s, it's now that we see its effects of scale, as the Japanese economy takes off. Our journey down memory lane begins with a Japanese adaptation of a Canadian classic, Anne of Green Gables. Being Canadian myself, like so many of my fellow Northerners, I have been inundated with variations upon the Anne story since I was born. This one is known in Japan as Akage no Anne, or Red-Haired Anne, brought to us by the prestigious Nippon Animation Studio. This is part of their larger World Masterpiece Theater franchise, sitting next to series like Heidi and The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. It's a fairly straightforward adaptation of the 1908 novel by Lucy Maud Montgomery. The principal protagonist, Anne Shirley, is an orphan in Nova Scotia and sent to live with an adoptive family, after years of being shuffled through various care houses and short-term fosters. Green Gables is the school where she finds home and happiness, having run-ins with various other characters, both friend and foe. It's a slice of life set in the early days of frontier living in Canada, focused mostly around school foibles, and it would get a follow-up prequel as recently as 2009, in Before Green Gables, and is generally considered a classic of Japanese television. It should come as no surprise to fans of this era that Isao Takahata was at the reins of this production. Known for his down-to-earth touch and heartfelt directorial style, Takahata would go on to be a co-founder of Studio Ghibli and direct Grave of the Fireflies, Pompoko, and The Tale of Princess Kaguya, among other such Ghibli hits, before passing away in 2018. Takahata wasn't by himself, of course. Hayao Miyazaki also worked on the show, having come aboard simultaneously with his constant partner in crime. They started off at Toei and left for Tokyo Movie Shinsha, then just Tokyo Movie, together, working on about 14 episodes of Lupin III, Part 1, back in 1971, before gallivanting off for greener pastures at Nippon. Bouncing around together on various high-profile projects through the 70s, their work on Anne would be one of their final productions prior to forming Ghibli, and we'll come back to them in later episodes as the 1980s march on. Next in 1979 is Zenderman. Though largely forgotten today, this was part of Tatsunoko's then popular Time Bokan franchise, best known via its stylish Yatterman entry. This one is about immortality and time travel, following a band of athletic super-teens and their mechanized sidekicks working for the scientist Dr. Monja. This trope of a youth group under the guidance of a scientist was pretty par for the course in the 70s, having been largely codified by Mazinger Z and duplicated by virtually every mecha and team-based shonen production thereafter. And yes, that means I'm looking at you, Neon Genesis Evangelion. Almost entirely episodic, the through line of the plot is that Dr. Monja wants to know the formula for the elixir of life, sending the Zenderman team through time tunnels to find the necessary ingredients. Of course, they're up against villains looking for the exact same thing, and hijinks ensue. Zenderman shares an incredible lot with its cousin Yatterman, down to having a virtual carbon copy of that series' villain trio in the Akudama gang. Sadly, the lead villain Mujo never quite caught on to be the sex icon that Yatterman's Doronjo was. Perhaps she lacked a big enough headpiece. It's a mystery. Time Bokan is a strange franchise, both formulaic and incredibly weird, and never quite as popular as maybe it should have been outside of Japan. Despite being ostensibly a children's show, it's oddly risque, with the villains frequently losing their clothes, getting spanked, inflated, put in various compromising positions, and so forth. In the end, it's a fairly funny entry in a franchise known for its cartoonish style and offbeat execution, just not as notable as its relatives. We now move on to something a bit more magical, and floral. Very floral. Hana no Ko Lunlun was created by Toei Animation and saw some decent success in Western markets as Lulu the Flower Angel. The titular Lunlun, whose last name is Flower, is a member of a plant-based people called the Flowern, who have taken refuge on Earth. Evil fairies want to steal their sacred flower to rule the Flowerns, and Lunlun has to prevent that. The lore, while very floral, as we've pointed out, makes a nicely realized world for Lunlun's adventures, and features some then-original concepts, such as its multitude of imaginative plant-based villains, that would be quite at home in a Poison Ivy-centric episode of Batman. It also bears the distinction of being quite possibly the first magical girl show to come to North America, in a short dubbed adaptation called Angel. Next, we come to something that still has ongoing material. Although creator Shotaro Ishinomori, responsible for other formative hits such as Kamen Rider, passed away in 1998, various successors to his properties have managed to keep this one alive, with even Netflix distributing the 2017 crossover Cyborg 009 vs. Devilman. We're talking, of course, about Cyborg 009. As a franchise, it follows the heroic exploits of 9 cyborgs, marked 001 through 009. Originally created to be weapons of war by the evil Black Ghost organization, the 9 cyborgs escape their creators using their individual powers and work to foil their creators' machinations. What are those machinations, you ask? In a surprisingly sophisticated turn, to start a world war, so they can be the arms supplier to both sides, and make a profit. They're not just your normal take over the world or destroy it bad guys, they're capitalist, war profiteering bad guys. This adaptation of Cyborg 009 ran from 1979 to 1980 and did 50 episodes, led off on each adventure by a theme song with lyrics composed by Ishinomori himself. It's a surprisingly engaging piece, showing just how multi-talented Ishinomori really was as a lyricist. The composition's legacy is sadly tainted by the involvement of Koichi Sugiyama, best known as the main musical composer for Dragon Quest, and for being a denier of war crimes by the Japanese Empire. Oh well, you can't have everything. Regardless, Cyborg 009 is largely remembered due to this TV series, being both more compelling in terms of plots than its 1968 predecessor, and a sight prettier due to advances in cell animation at the time. Oh, and being in color. As we come to the middle of March and the end of this portion of 1979, we visit with SF Saiyuki Starzinger. Probably known to some Western fans as the Spaceketeers portion of the Saturday morning anime block Force 5, this block also included Gaiking, Danguard Ace, Starvengers, aka Getarobo G, and Grandizer. You might also have heard of it as El Galactico or Cybot, depending on where you were in the world. Cybot is actually very strange as a moniker, considering the show has virtually no robots. It is yet another Toei animation production and reworks the basic plot and characters of the Chinese classic Journey to the West, aka Saiyuki, into a spacefaring adventure. The usual role of Sanzo the monk is replaced with Aurora the princess, Goku replaced by John Kogo, Cho Hakai by Don Haka, and Shagojo by Sir Jorgo. All names just different enough to be their own thing, without losing reference to the source material. It's also a work by Leiji Matsumoto, one of Japanese animation's long-lived luminaries, responsible for Galaxy Express 39 and Captain Harlock, among many others. While not one of his better productions, it isn't without merit and stands as a fun adaptation of Saiyuki. That wraps up this portion of 1979. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, comment, and maybe even subscribe. Thanks for watching. Next time on the Anime Archive Project, we take a look at a bee named Maya, a talking robot cat, and a transforming mech named Daltanius.